70% of crops worldwide rely on bees, but the cost of pollination is only going in one direction, and that's up. So how can growers that rely on these tiny creatures get more bang for their buck?
So for the majority of crops, we need pollination, we need insect pollination. So what farmers came up with is basically renting hives over the last, probably decade. The challenge is that you don't have any assurance to the quality of hives being deployed in the field. So you end up paying hundreds of dollars per acre to get pollination, basically to rent hives. And then during the pollination time frame, you might realize that 20% of those boxes are actually empty. So if you get no good pollination, you basically invested a lot of inputs into the crops and you don't materialize those flowers blooming out there to turn out to be output. So it's kind of a very expensive input that does not translate into the efficiency and the output that you expect.
How are you addressing some of these pain points?
So we basically realized that the bee problem that most of us are familiar with, it's not a beekeeper's problem, it's more of a food production problem, and we utilize small sensors. So it's an in-hive sensor, a small unit that goes into the beehive.
Yes.
So we can track and monitor what happens inside those boxes 24/7 all year long. And then we offer farmers to get precision pollination as a service, basically assuring that the quality of those hives being deployed in the field will meet the requirement to get the full pollination that they need. So we have 9 different sensors inside this small unit that goes inside the hives. The main 3 inputs would be sound, temperature, and humidity. Eventually, inside those hives, it's kind of a superorganism. It's an incubator, right? We have one queen. She's responsible for laying eggs. The working bees are responsible to maintaining those young bees and support the queen. And as a result, they go out there and they pollinate. They basically bring food to the colony. So by measuring all those inputs, we are able to identify patterns saying, okay, there's a queen problem. There's exposure to chemical. There are different types of things that will cause those colonies to collapse if not treated on time.
How actionable, I guess, is the information?
So from the farmer's perspective, from the grower's perspective, it's all about good pollination. They want to make sure that they get the pollination coverage that they need. During the pollination time frame, there's nothing much you can do. It's more about ensuring that the quality of hives being deployed in the field is good enough, and there's no immediate issue that needs to be addressed, like exposure to chemicals, or maybe hives that have been traveling to this specific farm have been not ventilated well, so they might collapse during the pollination. Those are the small things that need to be addressed in real time. Most of the effort is done behind the scene all year long. So by providing beekeepers with insights into what's happening in those hives, supporting their ability to treat their hives better, to maintain stronger and healthier hives, helps us to ensure that the quality of hives being deployed in the field is much better and much stronger.
So this is kind of strategic as well as tactical, if you like.
Yes, unfortunately there's no immediate thing. We're talking about biological mechanism. It's not like you can treat cancer just because you know about it. You need to be able to monitor the development of different things, and treatment will take time. The same thing goes for beehives. The stressors and the issues that we identified need to be addressed by the beekeepers all the time. It's not just about the peak of pollination that's where everything matters and the rest doesn't.
Okay.
So pollination, we've seen eventually the prices of pollination goes up because if you get no pollination, you get no outputs. I mean, look at the extreme situations of having all the hives, empty boxes in the field, you get no outputs, you lose your business. And if you have good beehives, you're getting good pollination, you at least get a chance, right? There are a lot of drivers that will affect the productivity. We established a model that basically meets the same ballpark of pricing that farmers pay today, but ensures the quality. The way that we established it is exactly because behind the scene, the work we do behind the scene with the beekeepers, allowing them to introduce stronger and healthier hives. So as you improve the quality of those hives, doubling and even sometimes tripling the quality of those hives, you can achieve the same level or even better quality of pollination without just deploying empty boxes in the field. So we've managed to maintain a certain price that is aligned with what the market is expected to pay for pollination, but now you get the quality of pollinators that you need, and that's where the farmers see the high ROI.
So that translates to yields, hopefully, and so on.
Yeah, so again, we can talk about the expectations of flowers to be pollinated and how this translates to yield. We are being very cautious in our claims to, increase yields by 30 and 50%. Sure. I mean, I can show you tons of case studies that supports why good pollination improve yields. We're not improving yields, we're improving hives. They improve yields. So it's kind of a tricky to claim.
So you've also developed some in-field sensors. What are they picking up?
So as part of our efforts to train the models for the in-hive sensors, we use the in-field monitoring to get a better sense of the pollinators' activity in the field. One major aspect is to ensure you get good bees. If you get no good bees to the field, you get no pollination. If you do get good bees, the question is, what are the bees doing? If you are deploying certain products into the field that affects pollination activity, you might be getting the best bees but no pollination. And some of the things we identified as we started to deploy those units, the in-hive sensors, into the field, is basically situations that males and females, for example, are not aligned, or you have different varieties in the field that are not blooming at the same time. So you might be getting the best bees out there, very good pollination activity, or very good bee visits, but not very good pollination activity. And working with high-value crops and vegetable seed producers, we realize some of those things can be adjusted. You can play with irrigation in order to sync certain genders or varieties to bloom together, which improves the quality of pollination. And that became kind of a bundle opportunity for farmers to get an end-to-end solution for the entire pollination needs. Now that we established some sort of a good credibility, we became the largest pollination provider both in the US and Australia, in a growth stage company. Now is how do we work with our customers to ensure that it's not just about introducing the strongest pollinators out there, it's also ensuring that the practice of pollination is done well. And how can they implement certain actions to ensure the process of pollination. And I completely agree with it. It's kind of our efforts to introduce this more of a long-term pollination solution to support the industry for the many more years down the road.
So tell me about how much progress you've made so far.
In the US market, as I mentioned, we're the largest pollination provider, so tens of millions of dollars in revenues, providing pollination services, precision pollination as a service. We expanded to crops like apples, cherries, a lot of berry activity all across the country, so it's not just about California where we started from. Last year we expanded it to the Australian market, so we had the same go-to-market approach, starting with a certain commodity and then expanding. We're doing the majority of almond pollination activity in Australia today, together with canola, apples, avocados, macadamia, so there are different kind of commodities in every geography. Just recently we announced our expansion into Latin America, starting with Peru, Chile, and soon Mexico. So there's a lot of expansion in the berry market in Latin America, and also avocado, which is a high-value crop that extremely depends on pollinators. So we are getting closer to $100 million in revenues. We expect to be there very soon. This year we'll probably exceed the 70.
So just a final question. How much money have you raised, and how are investors looking at your business and this wider kind of pollination space?
So starting from the second part of the question, I think we see a lot more investments into the pollination space. So when we first started, 7 years ago, we had to explain why pollination is important. I'm happy to see more and more companies trying to address this challenge. Each company has its own take on how to solve it, and I think that's great. And the fact that we see more money deployed into this field only highlights the fact that people start to realize the risk exposure associated with not getting good pollination, and the fact that pollination will not look the same 5 years down the road. So that's definitely a positive thing. We've raised around $62 million to date. We brought some strategic investors, all the way from Rabobank up to General Mills, so trying to cover pretty much strong existence within the entire scope of stakeholders in the industry. We are looking to probably do another fundraising, mainly in order to support our geographic expansion and the new revenue stream that we discussed, but we're pretty much on the profitability path, so it's kind of a less dependent on external money to support our expansion, but more about maturing the company, bringing the experience we need, and preparing for the future.